6:30, I'd like to go ahead and get the August 26, 2024 Peachtree City Planning Commission meeting started. If everyone would rise and join me in pledging allegiance to the flag of our country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. I'd like to welcome to our council members, Councilmember Holland and Councilmember Brown. Thank you for being here this evening. I'd like to go ahead and start, staff. Any additions or deletions?
No, sir.
Okay, announcements and reports.
I don't have any.
Okay, I do have one. Since we have a public hearing this evening, what I'd like to do is have a motion made to move the item 7, the new agenda item for conceptual site plan, indoor training facility and warehouse 1001 Moda Drive to ahead of the public hearing. Do we have a motion for that? Anyone?
Make a motion to move the conceptual site plan, indoor training facility and warehouse to the front of the new agenda items.
Okay, we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move that ahead of the public hearing. But before that, we need to have approval of the minutes. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes from the August 12th meeting. Any comments or questions related to the minutes? No? Okay. That being said, do we have a motion to accept the minutes as submitted?
Motion to accept the minutes as submitted.
Second.
There we go. That's better, thank you. And we have a second.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Minutes are approved as submitted. Okay, I'd like to go ahead and I guess we'll do old agenda items real quick. Is there anything on the old agenda just to get it out of the way? Nope, nothing. Okay, so I'd like to move on to the new agenda item, conceptual site plan, indoor training facility and warehouse 1001 MOBA Drive. I'd like to go ahead and turn that over to staff.
Okay, this site probably looks familiar to you. We have looked at this before last fall with a different plan, and it has come back to us with a new layout. This is presented to us by Highland Land Planning on behalf of Saltree Commercial. The project is in the MOBA Industrial Park on South 74. It is zoned GI, General Industrial, and it will contain two lots. Believe the addresses are 1301 MOBA and 1101 MOBA. The lots have already been combined through a minor plat. Oh no, I'm sorry, they haven't done that. They will have to do that, but they, never mind, I'll get to that in a minute. So, moving on to the site plan. It's not forward, there we go. All right, like I said, MOBA Industrial Park, 2 lots. They are currently vacant, and they will have to be replatted as 1 lot prior to the issuance of a building permit. The property line is not visible on this plan, but it is located approximately, I think it might be this dash line right here, right there. Again, those will be combined. The setback requirements for the GI district are front 30 feet, side 20, and rear 50. So you'll notice that this lot has 3 road frontages. There is a 60-foot buffer requirement along Highway 74 right here, so that supersedes the front setback requirement. I say 30 feet because there was a variance granted for the front setback. Normally it would be 50 feet. But because of the multiple road frontages does make this sort of a challenge for site layout. So in 2021, there was the variance granted to reduce the setback to 30 feet for this lot and the lot where the Moon Valley nursery is currently. And then just recently on August 1st, the city council approved a variance for this final lot here to reduce that front setback all the way around on both sides here. So the proposal is for an office/warehouse as well as indoor athletic training facility, and both of these uses are permitted in the zoning district. The athletic training facility is permitted on a conditional basis, and one of those conditions is that there's a dedicated entrance for the indoor training facility that is not shared with the other tenants. So you will see that the way this site is oriented, this is the entrance for this portion here, by the way, is for the athletic training facility, and these are mid-sized industrial warehouse units. Their entrances will all be here off of this smaller parking area, and the training facility will be here. A second condition is that there won't be any interference with I'll just call them customers, interference with this car traffic, with truck traffic and loading docks. And you can see that it's completely separated from both parking areas for the tenants. So it is also meeting that condition. There are some additional conditions that relate to building construction, and these will be assessed during the building permit process. With regards to, just quickly mention some development standards. As I mentioned, it does abut Highway 74, which does have the 60-foot tree-safe landscape buffer requirement. And being along Highway 74, that triggers the architectural review from the Planning Commission, so they will have to come back for a building elevation approval. Now to the parking requirements. The parking requirement for the office warehouse portion is pretty straightforward in our ordinance. It's 1 space per 300 square feet of the office portion and 1 space per 2,500 square feet of warehouse. But our ordinance does not have a specific parking requirement for pickleball. We do have a parking requirement listed for commercial recreation facility, which is fairly general and somewhat vague. And then there's also a conditional, part of that conditional use for the indoor training facility is that the owner must provide some documentation showing that there is sufficient parking to accommodate their use. So what they have done, they have used both a combination of the requirement for commercial recreation facility, which is 1 space per 200 square feet of general floor area. Then on top of that, they have imposed an additional requirement upon themselves. There are 20 pickleball courts in the training facility, and 4 athletes per court. So 4 athletes times 20 courts is 80 parking spaces. The general floor area, which is everything else aside from the courts and the walkways that surround the courts, is about 10,000 square feet. 1 space per 200 square feet is 50. So 80 and 50 for the pickleball, and then the office and manufacturing is 29. So 29 and 50 is 159, and 29, 50, and the 80 is 159. They're providing 160 parking spaces. You can see on the plan in the front of the training facility, they have 126 spaces, 22 in front of the warehouses, and an overflow of 12 for whoever needs them. And that is about it. Staff is of the opinion that the plan meets the ordinances and recommends approval of the site plan for the multi-tenant industrial building.
Perfect.
Thank you, staff. Do we have the applicant or representative?
My name's Chuck Ogletree with South Tree Commercial. We are the developer of this project, and I've got Jason Walls here with Highland Land Planning. I think Laura did a good job laying it out, and we've been working with staff over the last month or so trying to tweak this plan the best we could. I think we've got a good layout, so I'll be more than happy, or Jason will want us to answer any questions.
Perfect, thank you. Going to go ahead and open it up for questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Kriz, any questions?
Sure. Thanks for bringing this forward. I know a lot of people in the city are excited about this. I know Mr. Walls' general response to my question about golf cart parking is that he often sees trucks or other cars parked in those spaces, but did you consider, because there is a golf cart path right across the street there, adding some golf cart parking to the recreational facility?
We felt it was more important to have vehicle parking, and if golf carts park in it, they can. We were able to get enough parking for what we need on our site. So certainly golf carts can park in those as well. Is that the same answer Jason gives you?
Pretty close. Yeah, I don't really have any further questions. I'll save my comments.
Okay. Commissioner Hamner?
Yep. So again, thanks for bringing this to us. And again, to echo Commissioner Kritz, there's a lot of excitement around this. I have a question about the math. I know you walked through it a little bit. I just want to make sure I follow. So is there enough spaces? Obviously that meets the requirements, but it was in the math, was there enough spaces just to account for maximum number of players, or does it include maximum number of players plus potential staff that would be parking there as well?
So the maximum amount of players is 80. We got 20 courts at 4 per court. So the maximum amount of players is 80.
Okay.
And then so we have some general circulation area, and that is still being defined as we develop the plan. But that's how many more?
We got 80 for the players and 50 additional spaces.
Yeah,
Got it. So you'll have more than enough, basically.
correct, yes.
Yep. That answers my major question, because when there's MOBA games happening, those roads are just packed
Yeah.
with overflow on it. So I just wanted to make sure that there was enough to kind of accommodate maximum number of pickleball players, plus all the madness that MOBA brings over there as well. For
So
them.
that was part of the reason for flip-flopping the parking lot over to this side to get it away from MOBA, because those are our spaces, not MOBA's.
Yes, yes, makes sense.
Yep.
All right, no additional questions.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, good evening. Thanks for coming. Just a question about access. So right here, so I can draw on this. So this point and this point, this is where the big trucks will be coming in. And so who will probably park right there? Still office personnel?
It's probably warehouse employees for
Okay.
the remaining 50,000 square feet.
Okay, and there's an entrance for them back there
Correct,
too?
there will be.
Okay, but can cars from over here come this way too? Or is that,
Not with going back out onto the MOBA
okay,
way.
okay, I just wanted to understand those access points. Thank you. That was my only question.
Thank you. Commissioner Leota?
Yes, thank you. I also have some questions on the parking and seeing this exhibit and the designation of how many spaces are in each parking bay, essentially. So the math says that you need 130, is that right, for your operation?
Correct.
Okay. So you have 126 in the big parking area to the left of Suite 1A. That's not enough for 130. So there's some other parking that has to go in that 12 space.
If there needs to be.
Late-
That would
layout.
more likely be a weekend type situation
Okay.
where we don't have truck traffic coming in and
But
out.
some of those are gonna have to satisfy the office warehouse requirement, and some go towards the pickleball.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess to reiterate the issue with the soccer fields, and that when they have tournaments and whatnot, they take up the whole street. How does this operation work in terms of that kind of a thing? Are there tournaments, and And as a follow-up to that, when there are tournaments, are there more people that come than just the 4 players per court? Are there additional spectators, team members, that kind of a thing? That
Potentially,
might need
yes.
more parking?
Potentially, yes, but, that's part of the reason that we, as the owner of the building, could manage the truck courtyard. If it's a Saturday, we can notify the other tenants that the truck courtyard would be used for additional parking. We've set it up to accommodate all of our needs, not MOBA's needs, but all our needs.
So the warehouse facility does not operate on the weekend?
Typically, they don't.
Typically, they don't.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's part of us managing the tenants that are in the
Okay.
building. But we would have the parking, where you see 22 spaces, plus anything in the truck courtyard.
Okay. There was a question before, I don't know if I heard the answer. Do you have staff that checks people in and out, and how many?
Well, I'm not the pickleball. Are you talking about for pickleball?
Yes, for the pickleball.
Yes, they'll have staff out there.
Do we know how many?
In the facility, it will range. It's probably 5 to 6.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's a
It's
minimum.
not,
it's
it's
a
not
handful
a
of
major
people.
parking requirement on
Okay.
the employee side.
So I'm just trying to do the
Yeah.
math in terms of, you got 131, less 80, less 5, that leaves 45, 46 spaces for general.
And keep in mind, we're figuring kind of worst case scenario. All 4 people that are playing pickleball that day against each other all show up in different cars. A lot of times it's a husband and wife showing up, or they ride together. So we're
Right.
kind of trying to figure worst case scenario on that.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense to me. I was just thinking that when I see pickleball being played in town, there's usually not just 4 people on the court. There's other people waiting on the side. It's their turn next. They're watching. So I guess what I'm getting at is the 45 to 50 extra spaces from the general requirement enough to handle that additional potential crowd?
I believe so. You've got, assuming every court is full, everybody drove separate cars there, and then you've got another 40 to 50 spaces on top of that. I mean,
Right.
I think we've been very conservative in our
Okay.
calculations.
Okay. My gut feels like that probably should work, but I'm just concerned because of what the soccer complex
We
does
are
to
too.
the street, and I don't want you to not
don't wanna
have
add to that.
spaces or exacerbate it.
Correct. So,
Okay. I guess the only other comment I had would be to make sure the concept plan clearly describes where the existing lot line between the 2 lots are, and labels it that it's going to be removed, in the plating process, because it wasn't really clearly depicted on the concept that was submitted. But I understand where it is, but I think that just should
Okay.
make it clear.
we can do that.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson, any comments?
No, I have no other comments. I'm sure everyone's very excited to have this come in.
And Commissioner Leota, I'm sorry, did you have any other comments, or was that
No other
everything?
comments. I guess, just the understanding here is that the original warehouse plan is being reduced. It's being reduced from 60,000 to about 53 and change to accommodate the other building, and it all kind of makes sense based on the testimony.
Commissioner Hamner, comments?
No additional comments.
Commissioner Chris?
Only comment I have is, I understand Ray's concern about parking generally. Maybe you turn those 3 spots just south of the handicap spots, you turn those into 4 or 5 golf cart spots. You have a little more capacity. That's what I would like to see here. I think that's where we're going as a planning commission when we talk about what we're hoping to put into the ordinances, generally speaking. So I would like to see that, at least 5 spots for golf carts, but other than that, that's all I've got. I think it's a good plan.
Okay. And just echo the other commissioners' comments. I've been past there multiple times when there are soccer tournaments and soccer games. And yeah, they're parked all the way down that back drive, sometimes on both sides of the street. So that's one of the concerns that I had was if you have an event going on or there's say a pickleball event, plus there's a soccer game, it's going to be somewhat of mass chaos when it comes to parking. That would be my one big concern, and it's good that you're able to go ahead and control those truck yard spots to be able to put some overflow in that, and hopefully, that would take care of that issue. And I do want to echo also Commissioner Kriz. One of the things actually that came up today again was golf carts. And, unfortunately, at this point in time, we do not have any requirements as a golf cart city for golf cart parking, as well as golf cart charging and other things like that. But that's going to be a thing that we're going to be looking at, of course, going forward. So I'd like to see what can be done. A little creativity to do that if possible. And,
So Jason just brought this up. If you're looking at the 22 spaces here, it would be easy to add golf cart parking across here, but I'm getting into the 60-foot buffer, which I don't necessarily want to do because of the penalty that it will require me. But,
if they're unpaved,
if they're
slate or something like that.
some type of pervious material.
Yeah, I don't want to see mulch, but a more sustainable, not sustainable, a more permanent solution like the slate chips would be fine. But again, so the issue here is everybody's brain is thinking about how to make your request happen. And our ordinance prohibits any vehicular parking in this area, because that's the first thing I went to, was like, why don't we just put a few here? Well, our ordinance won't allow any parking in here. So the only place you can do is if you grabbed another 10 feet along here, you might be able to push this 10 feet and get 2 golf cart parking spaces over here at the end, maybe 4 since you're on either end, and then you might get a row all along here. 10 feet, even 10 feet though, they'd have to be angled, because most golf carts are longer than 10 feet. Well, I see a lot of I see a lot of 6-seaters in my section of the city. I call them limos. But in order for them to do that, you all have to give them, because y'all as a body have the only authority to reduce that 60 foot. And as he mentioned, and Chuck likes to remind us every time we come for a landscape plan, is that increases their tree replacement calculation by 10%, which.
What about this spot right here? Or somewhere right in this area?
I feel like we're trying to
Squeeze
jam them
'em.
in, right?
We
I
are.
mean,
Yeah.
when we think about effective golf cart parking, it's what Robin calls rock star parking, right? And that's the parking that's right up in front, allows folks to just get in and out real nice and easy and pack them in just like yeah. I don't think trying to jam them in elsewhere is really the intention that we're going for when we talk about
Yeah.
parking.
Well, not in the current ordinance. You're killing me, Miles.
I'm not a big fan of reducing the buffer along 74, and putting golf cart parking on that side of the property. I don't see how you can safely get carts over to it, because the cart path's on the other side of Mulba Drive at the other end. And so it's not an effective solution, I don't think. I think they're just gonna have to use regular parking spaces to put carts in, because, all right, so if you come there to play pickleball, instead of bringing your car, you're bringing your cart and you're using a parking space.
Right, it's 1 for 1.
It's the
We're in a
same
little-
thing.
We're in a little bit different area here with just the residential rooftops in proximity to here. When you were out there this past weekend, I wasn't there. Were there many golf carts parked along the road, or were they all just regular cars?
No, they were all cars.
Really? Because you don't see a lot of golf cart traffic through here.
And, and as this place gets established, we'll probably see more locals using it. MOBA is for tournaments. It is not for lessons and kind of local things. And so that's why they're cars, because they're coming from out. And I'm sure as this place grows in popularity in the region, and those tournaments will also bring in. But that's like planning for Christmas Eve or Christmas, you know what I mean? And so there are options too when you have tournaments, like we do even in other places in the city, to have busing, rent a lot on the other end of MOBA Drive and have them bus in or whatnot. So, but those are for the unique situations. Our ordinance is set for your daily operations, which actually they're exceeding. I'm just talking out loud.
So if we're just talking amongst ourselves, I mean, if I was gonna put a motion forward, I would move to approve this with the condition that they turn the 3 spots next to the handicap spots into golf cart spaces. And then can we allow that, considering the numbers?
It's an ordinance, so they'd have to get a variance, because they need, 159, and they've provided 160, so they can only reduce by 1. I'm sorry, I wish I had better answers. I mean, and the other thing is, they could do 18 courts instead of 20. I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
No, then I wouldn't make that. I would just approve it as is. Yeah.
Yeah.
To be specific on the golf cart, what you can unpaved, so slate chips.
Impervious.
With the front setback, not the 60-foot setback, but the front building setback up there.
It says no parking or circulation can occur between the building and its front setback, or in the front property line. Sorry.
Well, I think our hands are tied by
Yeah.
the parking requirements.
I think, yeah, but the way the ordinance is set up, and unfortunately, there's not a lot of flexibility in there as of right now, but if you happen to sharpen your pencil and put your creative hat on, if there's something you can work out, that would be great.
Okay.
But if not, I think exactly where we're at. So therefore, I'd like to go ahead and, do we have a motion for approval?
Move to approve the conceptual site plan for the indoor training facility and warehouse at 1001 MOBA Drive.
So we have a motion to approve the conceptual site plan. Do we have a second?
A second?
Motion to approve in a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Conceptual site plan is approved. Thank you very much. Okay. So we are going to now get into the public hearing for the zoning code text amendment to create a short-term rental permit and review process. Before I turn it,
Not this one. Sorry.
it's okay. While he's getting that set up, I'm just going to go ahead and go over the public hearing procedures. When the public hearing is opened, members of the planning commission will become hearers. No action on their part is in order until the chairperson declares the hearing complete. The chairperson will allow each side equal opportunity to the floor. Individual members of the public will be given up to 5 minutes to state their case. First, city staff will present the request and provide an assessment of compliance with city code. Next, those supporting the issue will be heard, and that includes the applicant. Then those opposing the issue will be heard. Prior to closing the public hearing, input portion of the meeting, city staff and the public will be given the opportunity to ask questions of either or both sides of the issue. When the chairperson is assured that input is complete, the public hearing shall be ended, and the planning commission may then debate the issue and render a decision. All speakers from the public are asked to follow these rules. Come to the microphone and state your name and neighborhood prior to making remarks. Please keep your remarks under 5 minutes, and please try not to repeat others' comments, and address all comments to the chairperson. Thank you. I'm going to turn that over to staff.
Okay, thank you. So as a reminder, we always want to begin with why we're creating an ordinance. For the purposes of this ordinance is to protect the health, safety of our current residents as well as those visiting and using short-term rentals here in the city, and to preserve the residential character of the neighborhoods. It's been a long process, and we've come a long ways. We actually started in depth in mid-2022, and then we were able to, I guess, we had a couple of workshops in mid-2023. at which point in August, council voted to say, okay, we've talked about this, we've got a good draft, we're ready to move forward, please send it through the public hearing process. So they had, you had the first public hearing, September 25th of last year. And then, feeling like there needed to be more public discussion, you followed up with a second public workshop where you've made a recommendation. You know, nothing was unanimous, but there was compromise made, and you pushed forward a draft to the November 16th meeting. City Council did have a public discussion and discussed items that they liked and didn't like, but at the end of the day, they decided to not adopt the ordinance. We have a new composition of council, and in the beginning of January, they directed us to put this on in the hopper and move this, let's bring this back up and talk about it. And so we are here tonight to hold this public hearing. Now, in our previous meetings, when we discussed this was coming up, you all indicated to us that you would like to just start where we ended last time. And so we have put it forward, a draft of the ordinance that was in the packet. The only change that occurred after, that wasn't directed by City Council was this language. They were interested in not just having a statewide background check done, but to have the powers to do a nationwide background check. And so the language, and it is detailed and very legalese sounding, comes from the GBI. That gives us, if we include that language, then that gives us the ability to do a background check of somebody in all states. So tonight, our goal is to have this public hearing, this public discussion, and for you all to discuss the items and decide if you want to make a recommendation to forward it to council, or if you'd like to continue discussing it. So I'm going to highlight where we are or where we ended last year. We are requiring that anybody who operates a short-term rental in the city must get a permit. That there is a cap. It's been reduced to 1% of all residential structures in the city. This is determined by the tax assessor. And right now, 1% is 135. That would be the maximum number of short-term rental permits. And the City Council wanted to see that those who can prove they have operated a short-term rental prior to the adoption of the ordinance would get permitting priority, which we can do logistically downstairs. There is no grandfathering of short-term rentals. That means if you operate one, you must get a permit. The ordinance allows short-term rentals to be either bedrooms in somebody's homes, like an individual bedroom, or the whole house. Does not have to be owner occupied, but you cannot rent out a detached structure such as a pool house, or if you have a large lot, a guest house, or an RV, or a tent, or a yurt, or anything like that. And of course, no subleasing is permitted. So they can't get a permit to run a short-term rental and then sublease it to somebody else who actually operates and gets the revenue from it. A local contact person is required. They must be 21 years or older and be available, respond to calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They must be able to be on site within 1 hour if requested by the city. And so this can be a managing agent, which is something that is regulated by the state, but it does not have to be a managing agent. And then instead of the notification by letters within 500 feet, the council has agreed to, or at their last discussion, felt that having a publicly accessible online dashboard of all permits, short-term rental permits in the city that included the addresses and the local contact information be searchable and available on our city website. The minimum standards if you're going to have a short-term rental, these are the minimum operational and structural standards. No special events or parties. Sorry, no bachelorette parties in a short-term rental. All short-term rental parking must be off-street and on paved surfaces. Garbage must be screened from view, and only a bedroom can be used for sleeping, and a bedroom as defined by the International Building Code. So you cannot take a rec room in the basement and fill it with twin beds, bunk beds, because even when you're in a bedroom, there's going to be a maximum of 3 persons per bedroom permitted, and that is going to be determined by the inspector who does the inspection, a city, either the building official or the code enforcement. So it's not that somebody is just telling you you have these number of bedrooms. It's actually a city staff member going out and inspecting it. They must post the noise ordinance requirements as well as the parking requirements, and they must post that phone number of their local contact person. To apply, all property owners or LLC agents must consent to the criminal background check. They must pass a fire marshal and code enforcement inspection. They must keep a copy of the guest occupancy agreement. Give us a copy of the guest occupancy agreement. And it is, the permit is good for 365 days, which is a $400 annual fee, a $300 annual renewal. That's reduced because there was some discussion that the background check would not be performed on renewals. Here's the enforcement, which recognizes the changes that you all made to council. It's a 3 strikes you're out, with the first strike being a $500 fine, second being a $750, and the third strike is a $1,000 fine, plus you get revoked for 24 months on that particular permit gets revoked for 24 months, and that agent or owner cannot apply for a new short-term rental anywhere in the city for the next 24 months. So that's high stakes. So that is the guts of the ordinance. I'm happy to answer any details or take any of your directions.
Okay. Before I open it up to the public, any comments to staff real quick?
Should we go public first, or do we have questions to the staff?
We typically do public first.
Right. Okay, just wanted to make sure there was nothing up here. Okay, going to go ahead and open it up to the public. Going to ask for those supporting the issue to please step forward to the microphone.
Supporting the issue, do you mean
Yep.
supporting,
Supporting the ordinance, correct?
is this on?
Yes.
There you go. Your name and
If you would give your name and your neighborhood, please.
I'm Kathy Valencia, Smoke Rise. So I know that you all have probably heard many stories about what we went through in Smoke Rise with some of the houses that we've had there, and there was more than one. And I know that you probably are also aware that a city can preserve its character. And Peachtree City has a definite character. It's a very residential community, and people come here because they want a quiet and peaceful home life. And it's not like a location in Florida where you have a totally different atmosphere. And in a location like that is a destination location, you know in advance if you're moving into a community that allows short-term rentals or not. Most of us have moved here, and the city is an older city now, and when we moved to our locations, there were no homeowners associations with rules and regulations that said short-term rentals are or are not allowed. So we have quite a few subdivisions in Peachtree City that do not have HOAs and do not restrict short-term rentals. So I believe that the ordinance needs to be tightened up in order to preserve the character of Peachtree City. And if you've ever lived next to a short-term rental, you know what I'm talking about. And under section 917.5, there's a couple of things that I would like to see you restrict a little bit more. The first is that it says 1% of the population or the number of houses would not be, would be allowed to have a short-term rental. So I would like for you to put a definite cap on that. For example, like 120 houses and limit it to that amount. Because as the city gets bigger, more and more of the subdivisions that don't have the HOAs, and HOAs are very, very difficult to start up. So it's not like you can say, well, shame on you, homeowner, go get your own HOA going. It's very expensive and very difficult to do an HOA. So if there was a limit, then that as the population grows, you don't want the percentage to be dumped onto the people who don't have the HOAs, where those small subdivisions and the older subdivisions get more and more and more of the 1% that is allowed, if you know what I mean mathematically. Also, I would like to see you put in there where if a neighbor complains, that they can complain confidentially, that they don't have to have their name outed to the owner of the short-term rental. We had on our street some single mothers who were very afraid of retaliation if they reported anything to the police. So they were afraid of reporting parties and party buses and prostitution that was going on our street because they didn't want any backlash since they were at home alone with their children. So some type of confidentiality would be good. Another thing would be that, so I know that there has been a lot of discussion about notice to neighbors who are going to be living next to these de facto hotels. So what I would suggest is that you put in there that the subdivision will be notified that there is a short-term rental, even if it's not notified which house is the short-term rental, and where they can go to look up and see which houses are on the website, so that they will know if there's unusual activity that it's probably related to a short-term rental, and they will at least know what to do. So this would be a letter from the city that says, in subdivision ABC, there are some short-term rentals. If you have a problem with that, here's what you do. And that letter should be sent out regularly, once every year or two. So these are some of the comments that I have about the short-term rentals, where you're not going to end up with massive numbers of short-term rentals in the older subdivisions that don't have the HOAs and don't have the money or the ability to form HOAs. Because even if you have an HOA, a lot of courts have decided against the wording of the HOA requirements about the short-term rentals, and they have found that due to ambiguity, the short-term rental subdivision covenants could not be enforced. So just to be aware, let's keep our character here in Peachtree City as it is. Let's protect our city against what we've went through in Smoke Rise. And let's tighten up this ordinance and make it something that is not going to be destructive to the people who have to live next to the ones that have gotten out of hand and that are a negative event for those who live around them.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else speaking in favor of the ordinance?
My name is Glenn Valencia. I'm in Smoke Rise, and I lived right down the street from the Airbnb that was so problematic. And a lot of people think that this was something that was unusual, but it wasn't. We had the same exact thing happen in a property at the same exact time in North Carolina. We had to have people arrested. We had a lot of murders. We had dangerous people going up and down the street. I almost got hit by a car one time trying to figure out where the address was. We weren't paying attention. The whole thing was problematic. If we had not gone to the owner of the house and convinced him to stop renting it as an Airbnb, I wouldn't be here tonight, because we would have moved and we would have left Peachtree City. That was our option at that point. So if I were you, I would consider getting rid of Airbnbs completely, keeping the ones that are in place now, eventually phasing them out as they are not Airbnbs anymore, so that we don't have to go through this. And I'm to the point that I could move somewhere else. My kids have grown. We love Peachtree City. I'm a big advocate of Peachtree City. I want my kids to move back here and raise their kids here, and I don't want them to have to live next to an Airbnb when they do, because it was dangerous, it was problematic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I live in Peachtree City, Cypress Point.
You could please give your name, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Claudia Eisenberg, 203 Riviera Court. I live in a neighborhood who has an HOA, and we do not allow short-term rental. In fact, we allow no rental at all. When the house across the street from me went up for sale, they had 5 offers within 24 hours. 4 dropped out right away when they found out that there was no short-term rental. As far as the ordinance, we do know that short-term rental is the new hotel motel. And I have to agree with the Valencias who just spoke. When you buy a home in a neighborhood, you're not expecting a hotel or a motel to be operating next door. Fire codes. Fire code would be greatly concerned. We saw the short-term rental in Serenbe where the staircase melted within minutes, and a couple were stuck on the 3rd floor. I assume there was no collapsible ladder. I've owned a home with a 3rd floor that I built in 1989, and I went to the fire department and asked them. There was a collapsible ladder then that we owned that you could throw out the window. It had hooks and climb out. I think that you owe that to the renter, that they are renting a safe place. The one in Serenbe, I know the owner is actually suing the guests. So I don't know what went on there that would flip the lawsuit, but it has. And again, I think we need to be almost as strict. I don't know that you could require sprinkler systems in a short-term rental, but I do believe that the owner needs to abide by the same safety codes that a hotel motel would offer a guest. And again, that would be random inspections by the fire marshal to make sure that the fire alarms work. It makes me wonder about the Serenbe fire. Was there no fire alarms that couple on the 3rd floor could not get out before the staircase melted?
Thank you. Do we have anyone else in favor of the ordinance?
My name is Ralph Hale. I live in Crabapple Woods. Generally speaking, I'm opposed to many motels in residential neighborhoods. But if the city is going to allow it, we do need to have restrictions and all kinds of different things. One of the things I'm concerned about, who in the city is going to manage this stuff? Are you going to contact Airbnb, Verbro, and all the other ones to tell them that they can no longer have short-term rentals unless they have a permit? Hopefully, from what you guys have put out, you will have online a list of permitted short-term rentals, so that anybody in town hopefully can look and see if there's something's going on in their neighborhood. Is that particular residence permitted? Are you going to have, like on the official Peachtree City website, they have a section that say visitors, where to stay, and you have motels listed? Are you going to have something so people can look up these various short-term rentals? Hopefully we're going to make sure that if these are mini motels, which they are, they pay hotel motel tax. So it's just my concern, and hopefully everything works out. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else speaking in favor of the ordinance? Okay. I'd like to open it up to those opposing the ordinance.
Good evening. My name is Chris Anderson. I live in Burnham Woods and have lived here in Peachtree City for 21 years. We have a rental house that we've had for 16, and I think we've had it as a short-term rental for 5 or 6 years. I want to, I guess, give kudos or congratulatory comments toward the staff because the draft ordinance is very detailed, and I think that's their job to do, is to go through and put as much in there that they can to control as much as possible. And I think that that's their job. Mr. Chairman, and you who are listening to this hearing have the opportunity to vote for and against, but I think it's really important to look at the draft language and see what it actually is doing. There is a checklist of things that have been gone through that are fine as far as yes or no's, but those things that are included have some pretty strict and some pretty difficult things to deal with if you're somebody who is an owner or an operator of a property that's a short-term rental according to the ordinance. I have problems with several things, but I want to talk about 3 or 4 of them. First off, having a map or a database that's maintained on the Peachtree City website of the residence itself, that is of the short-term rental, is problematry and really scary, actually, as an owner of that property, because you don't want people to be able to, from wherever, to be able to know exactly what a property is, that's a short-term rental is, and see and be able to go to that property when it's not being rented. We don't even give that information to anybody until they actually have the reservation set. And we'd rather not have that be public information to everybody. And if that database were to be in place, it would be a database that only city officials could have access to, not everybody else. Also, the permitting process, why does it need to be annual that it's done every year? Okay, if you're going to do the background check, which I think the background check, being what it is or what has been proposed, is super detailed, in fact, requiring fingerprints and going through a whole process. I'm not concerned with that personally, but I'm actually an insurance broker or a licensed insurance agent in Georgia. And because of that, I'm required to go through training and a lot of other things that I do every year, but I'm not required to give my fingerprints, even though they do a background check on us. So the fingerprinting piece of it seems pretty egregious. In regard to the accommodation to the standards, it says here that all structures to be used for short-term rentals are to satisfy the National Fire Protection Association and international fire codes, and adopted and amended by the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. Is that what's required of a normal residential property? Or is that something that's even a level higher? And is that fair if it's normal residential property in a residence to be requiring that? And I would say that it's not. To be honest, a short-term rental property is a property that's being leased to somebody for a few days as opposed to more than a month or a year, right? And what's the difference in that property requirement for somebody that's living in a year as opposed to, 30 days or less than 30 days? And why are you going to require more stringent property fire code on a location that's for a few days versus years? Another thing that I'm concerned with is why are you requiring a room to have and this is on 917.12,
Your time has expired.
why are you going to require that room to have a 6 feet floor to ceiling closet space that could have heated closet space as opposed to an armoire? It seems like it's getting way in the weeds and requiring things that aren't really necessary.
If you could wrap up your thoughts, I would appreciate it.
So-
Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Just some things that are details that seem to be very stringent and would be very problematic. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lois Bredemeyer, and I live in the Marks, okay? Mr. Councilman, I would like to ask, okay, if you would ask Robin to give us a breakdown of the $400 fee. As a business owner, I went to your front office and I applied for a business license for $105. For employees, for 5, it's $150. I would love to know a breakdown of why we're paying $400, okay? And then as far as some of your restrictions, okay, as far as your database for us being on a public, you are in violation of the Privacy Act of 2020. No disclosures without consent rules. No agency shall disclose any records which is continually in a system or records by any means of communication to any person or other agencies except pursuant to a written consent or with the prior consent of the individual to whom the records pertain. You also are in violation of the 14th Amendment in our intellectual rights, which says that you cannot publicize our private information, whether it be mine or the client, the guest, okay, and put that on public record without our permission, all right? So I would also like to address the fact that there was supposed to be a contact person on the property for 24/7. If you have an emergency, they require us to write to the council in writing for that change of persons. If you had a medical emergency, and my daughter was in a car accident and I had to run at 10 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, when there is no council person around to give them a handwritten change of who's gonna watch over my property, okay, there is a big problem. And even if you mail it, God knows our mail is 15 days late or it never gets here. We have a huge problem with our mailing system, all right? So I think that is something that really needs to be addressed. I really honestly think that I would like to close with this, that no other business in Peachtree City, Fayette County, or Georgia has the requirements to open up their books. You know, as far as violation goes, you have in there that you can open up my financial statements for the past 3 years. And according to the rights of the Financial Privacy Act of 1978, you are in violation of protecting the confidentiality of personal records created by a statutory Fourth Amendment protecting bank records. In that agreement, you also are giving the Georgia Health Department the right to do that, to be able to go into my financial. The only ones that can go into my financial is if I have a court order or if I am being audited by the federal government. All right, I really honestly think that there is no other business in Fayette County that has these restrictions. There's no other business in this county that is being fined for violations, all right, or being treated as a criminal with background checks, the GBI, my fingerprints. I am in my 70s. I've been here for 33 years. I have a perfect record. I am not a criminal, and I do not like to be treated as one. I honestly believe that SDRs have been blamed for a scapegoat on a bad leasing, a leasing that went bad. All right? And I think that this is very discriminatory when you're going after one single business entity.
Your time has expired. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's Mike Murtaugh, The Terraces. I've aged a little bit since we last met. I have to wear these cheaters, so I apologize. You know, I need to set the record straight. Every meeting I try to do this honestly and sincerely. I don't have a horse in this race. I used to own TCBY for 10 years. I've lived here 25 years. We've raised our 3 boys to young men. This is home. We were blessed to purchase Sally and David Satterwaith's house as our downsize house. We weren't ready to move into it, so we did Airbnb 2018-19 with no issues. We had families coming for first births, graduations, funerals, no parties, no issues. Currently, I reside in the Terraces, like I said. Guess who my neighbor is? Chris and Denise. Airbnb, 118, Terrace Tay. I own a house next to them, long-term rental. Kevin and Rachel, great people. So I've had Airbnb. I have long and midterm rentals. I live with an Airbnb in my neighborhood. We are non-HOA. I've talked with the judge and her husband, and I feel for what happened. However, due to some miscommunication, misunderstandings, mispress, previous council members spewing innuendos, fear factors, you name it, that was never a true, genuine Airbnb. And it took a life of its own. And unfortunately, the result of this is this obscure, unmanageable, unenforceable SDR ordinance that somehow took a new life of its own since we last met. So over 2 years, other than smoke rise, name one police call, name one ordinance violation that's been assigned to anybody in Peachtree City running a short-term rental, a genuine short-term rental. I will tell you, Judge Moon's not here, but I know it's zero. Nada, none. And here we are spending hours and hours of our time, most valuable resource we have, asset, our time, still pandering and discussing back and forth. And I thought we had at least some common ground that we were developing on. But if you were to just be a neutral party and read this ordinance without, again, like me, I read through this and it says instead of the safety and concerns and the integrity of our community, let's put someone out of business. And I will take to heart, and you can look in the previous council member Prebor, I remember this day in that very seat saying, why can't we just do away with these things? Is that our community that I've lived and enjoyed for 25 years? And we have equal say and equal beliefs in what we see this wonderful community as. But here again, I see pitting citizen against citizen with not the facts, with innuendo. Oh, North Carolina, this happened. Well, okay, I feel you, or I don't not believe you. But again, we're not basing decisions here on facts and information that could have resolved this months and months ago if we were allowed as operators to sit down and haggle and hash through this in an equitable Peachtree City way. So thank you, commissioners. I hope you hear us. I think bulldoze the thing, start from ground up. This is this is not Peachtree City. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak in opposition?
Greetings, I'm Iris Owens. I'm the president of the Fayette County Board of Realtors. And my point is to the fact that being mindful of private property rights. And so first, when you are saying that you're going to have someone manage this or manage these properties with regards to someone from a city staff, you cannot manage property without a real estate license. That is against the law. And secondly, there are certain parts of this ordinance that is an infringement upon the private property rights of owners. So those are just my points. I would just ask that you would look more into those points that you're planning to put in place and how they relate to real estate law. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Okay. That is the case. Let me go ahead and close the public comment period of the public hearing. Okay. I'd like to open it up to commissioners at this point in time. I'm going to start at my left. Commissioner Leota.
First, I want to thank the public for coming out and providing the information and the insights that they have. It's very important that not only the commissioners, but the council hears those comments, and hopefully we all take those comments in advice when we decide on what this might or might not be. There's an awful lot here. And I had a question for Robin about the number that you got from the assessor to determine the 1%. Did that include townhome condominium ownership type units as well?
Yes.
And not just single family?
Yep, it's any,
Okay,
it's any residential unit.
all right, but not a rental apartment?
They don't differentiate rental versus ownership.
Okay.
It's any residential unit that is taxed.
Okay, so I guess one of my first questions about this draft was in the second section, 917.2, it talks about residential zoning districts and zoning districts where residential uses are permitted. I'm not sure this short-term rental issue is targeted towards rental apartments that are for rent normally.
Right, it is not. That's where the no subleasing comes in play. So you can't go
Okay.
rent an apartment unit and then turn around and list it as a short-term rental.
Okay. So could those apartment owners rent their apartments as short-term rentals?
Yes.
They could, okay. Just a general comment. I think the fingerprinting is a little heavy-handed in terms of the background check. There's other ways of doing background checks than through the fingerprint process.
I have
It's
to
just
say,
my thought.
That's not, that language comes from the GBI, and they told us if we want to do a nationwide background, that's the language we had to use.
No, I understand.
So I don't know, I'm not informed other than that.
I'm just thinking about, I've worked for corporations that do background checks on employees. They don't take fingerprints. I've taken jobs where I had background checks done on me. I never gave fingerprints.
It's the same process that we use for massage therapy licenses
Okay.
and alcohol licenses.
Okay, all right, that explains it. In terms of the fire and the building code inspection, do we know what that would include? Like, is there a list of what they might be looking at, like
I have a draft
working
checklist.
smoke alarms,
That's
fires?
exactly, and it is not different. It is not the hotel.
Okay,
It is not the requirements that are for what are called. They're actually called tourist accommodations.
okay,
And so it is things like exit paths to doors are unobstructed. Exit doors open easily and completely. One emergency escape opening per bedroom, which can be qualified as an operable window or a second direct exit. I mean, these are all
Okay.
things that are your home that you live in if it was built since 2018, because that's when the state of Georgia adopted the current version. It has all of these things required.
okay, so there's some specific requirements that the ordinance could point to say these things apply to this section?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I'll get to the notice in a second, but I just want to cover a couple of other things. In the display of the permit and notification section, 91714, item 5 talks about the parking. Must be located on property, only designated hard surfaces, and not at any public street or private road. How can we stop people from parking on a public street?
If they have a short-term rental permit and that parking is associated with that home, then they have to comply with the ordinance for that permit.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right, and I guess my last comment has to do with the notice issue. I look at this as if it's, and we heard a few people talk about this issue. I look at this as if it's a commercial business. It's essentially a single unit motel that's being introduced into a residential neighborhood, property, zone, whichever way you want to refer to it. So if someone came to the council and said they wanted to put a motel in a residential zone, we'd be noticing people. Because it's either a variance or a zone change. So I think this is extremely similar in that there should be some public notice to neighborhood. And I'm thinking 200-foot radius maybe makes sense because it coincides with other types of variance notice conditions. I think that should happen. I think the people in the neighborhood, if the short-term rental property qualifies under the conditions, I think before the permit's issued, I think the people in the neighborhood should know that that's getting a permit. That's my personal opinion. I think it's a zoning issue. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Let's see. So I apologize if this was already brought up. I think we did last time. How many current rentals do we have in the city?
Well, we pay for a tracking service, and as of today, and here's what's tricky, okay? So they scour 80 websites and put all of that information, and they came up with 130 listings. However, if you've ever operated one of the, you may list on multiple sites. And so there is a verification process that they go through, and they have estimated that there are 78 unique short-term rentals currently operating as of this morning. So that's an estimate. To get a full verification report is what we would pull from them, and it takes about 24 hours to get.
Okay. And so I wanted to clarify when you say you can't rent out detached structures like an RV and tents and stuff. Does that include like a room above a detached garage that
That's
even has,
correct.
okay. Okay, I just wanted to confirm that.
And that
Um,
complies with our current ordinance, because you're not supposed to have detached living quarters unless you're in the R3 or ER zoning district. But even then, those residential units are not supposed to be rented.
Right, okay. Thanks for clarifying that. And then just, it kind of came up, but like, what constitutes a bedroom? Window and a closet, or just a
So,
closet? Or-
That is where all of that detailed language comes from, is the building code or the International Building Code definition of a bedroom. And so that's why it talks about heated storage space and how tall it is and
Right.
whatnot. So
Okay.
if my code enforcement officer were here, he would give you that number right off the top of his head. But it's a certain amount of feet per sleeping resident.
Okay. Okay. Let's see.
There it is.
Do you have a breakdown of the $400 fee, or is that just a flat number?
I did create a spreadsheet. I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
To be honest, our new our new fee schedule goes in effect in October, and it would actually be higher. We pay $125 per inspection, and so you've got a fire inspection, you've got a building inspection. We took the annual cost of that tracking contract, we divided it by 135 units, and each of them are paying that share of that contract to track it. And then there's, I think, $75 in there to do the background check.
Okay. Right. I think that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Hamner?
All right, just a few questions.
Okay.
Starting off with the smoke rise incident that happened, which, again, awful that happened there. From the city's point of view, are you able just to recap kind of the history on that, just very briefly? Because again, there's been a lot of
I
conversation.
am sure I don't have all of the facts.
Okay.
What I understand is that it was owned by somebody who leased it out to somebody who then leased it out as, this is where that no subleasing allowed
Right.
clause came in from. And they had a rec room filled with bunk beds and whatnot, and just generally disrespectful of the property and the neighbors through its lack of oversight of operations. We have since adopted the noise ordinance, which allowed us to capture some of the parties that were happening there. And we're not getting the complaints, so I'm not sure if ownership has changed or if they've pulled it off of their list for rental. But we have not received any short-term rental police complaints between January 1st and I think we last looked was, we're in August now, so it's since June. So I can get an update from the police chief tomorrow morning at our ELT meeting, but to my knowledge, we're not having any related police issues.
Got it. So just to recap, there was a sublease of a property that was being rented out on Airbnb, is that?
I don't even think it was. I don't think
No.
it was. I think it was and I think it was maybe even had its own private website. And to be honest, we're not going to capture those in this ordinance. But when we do find them, having this ordinance in place allows us to shut it down.
Understood. You somewhat already answered this as well. You said that, for Airbnbs, excluding the smoke rise incident on that, there's not been any complaints that we know of.
When we last talked to the police chief in June or July, there were 0, and I can get you that update tomorrow, and I can send that out.
Okay.
But if we were, I suspect, because the police chief and the assistant chief, when we meet weekly, I suspect they know that this is coming. We've been talking about this at a staff level. I suspect if there were issues that they would have reached out to me, but I will verify that.
Okay. The 1% cap, is that in line with other municipalities,
No,
or is
sir.
that, how is that?
The only place in Georgia that has a percentage cap is around Lake Lanier,
Okay.
and it is 15%. So this is unique, and it is being watched at a state legislative level.
Okay. From a, obviously it's a percentage, it's not a hard cap,
Right.
like an absolute number. Is the absolute number for a city our size, is this still comparable to other cities from an absolute value perspective?
They don't cap them. Other cities don't cap them. If they regulate them, they don't cap them.
Okay.
Now, outside of state of Georgia, there are some municipalities that will do a census block maximum. Like, we won't issue more than X amount percentage of units in per census block. And that captures sort of that granular issue. And I think Savannah, which is unique, they have some type of, no, actually I don't think they have a limit. They just have the types of permits that are allowed based on the zoning district. So if you're in sort of the historic district, you can't just rent out a room. It has to be the whole thing, that kind of thing.
Got it. Do we keep online registries for other businesses in Peachtree City, similar to what we're talking about for this?
Peachtree City does not.
Okay. Real quick, there was a gentleman earlier who, apologies, I forgot the name on this, but talking about the dangers of having that information publicly available. Can I just ask a question for that, just for additional details? Somebody had said, like, having this information publicly available was dangerous in some capacities on that. So I just wanted some additional, like, if you could dig a little bit deeper into that, some of the rationale behind that comment.
Okay, yeah, so the rationale is.
I'm so sorry. If you could come to that so that our recording will capture it.
Sure. We don't give out our address, even to people who are asking about it, until they actually have registered and paid that they're going to come and stay there. And the reason is we don't want people to know where it is specifically. And the rationale behind it is you don't want people in the public to know that this is a location that they could monitor and track and see when somebody's there and when somebody isn't, and then go and stay there without even, go and break in kind of thing. And the reason is because that's that kind of information, even the platforms, Airbnb, VRBO, do not provide that information until it's actually rented. And they do that for that reason, because it's not information that people can go in and find out about before even actually putting down the money, and the owner or the operator allowing and confirming that they're the kind of people they want to stay there. Those platforms are really good platforms. Airbnb is a platform that doesn't allow parties. It did back then. That was like 4 years ago or 3 years ago, right? They don't anymore. That's a rule that is in place, and it's pretty much across the board. They can't get away with it easy at all. If they find out ever that there's a party there under that owner or operator, they're kicked off the platform and they can't come back again.
How would they find out?
They would find out. The host can report. It depends. I don't know exactly how they do.
Host would self. Okay.
Is that all?
That answers my question. Yes.
Do you want to add any?
Sure.
Thank you. Just to dovetail what Chris was saying, so the reason why we don't let people know that the home is vacant, and this would be a vacancy, is squatters. And again, you guys should align with us here, because what happened to you in Smoke Rise with a long-term lease being subleased, the same thing. You think we have issues with potential short-term rentals, bring squatters into Peachtree City that you can't get out. look at what's going on in Atlanta, and if you want to put the fear mongering to work, that's a real issue. Landlords are finding it very difficult to remove squatters. They almost have more legal rights. So that's, again, one of the reasons why a public database can be fished and used by the people we don't want in Peachtree City to find vacant houses. And I know the police will say, notify them when it's empty, but again, on a short-term rental, it might be gone empty for 2 days or 3 days or a week. We're not gonna bother Chief Moon's team to come and do drive-bys 12 times, 15 times a month or something like that. Thank you.
Cool. That answers my question. Thank you.
Commissioner Chris?
Okay, just curious, Robin, because we're on questions. Did our city council review this to determine if there were any legal risks to adopting an ordinance like this?
Goodness, yes. This has been through several legal teams, both our city attorney as well as our prosecutor.
And what was the general conclusion?
Well, they added some language to help protect us and protect our residents, but in general, this has been supported at a state level.
Okay. Can we pull up the slide where you had mentioned the differences between where we are now and where we are last October? Because I think there was one thing that was incorrect there. I took a look at our minutes from the October 9th meeting from 2023. From what I can tell from the minutes, it looked like we supported a 200-foot notification and not the database.
Right. This is from council.
Okay, so this is from
at their
council.
public meeting, they had made these changes, and they actually went down the road and voted on them, and voted on each issue, on whether they supported it or not.
Okay.
And even then.
Okay. Great. Those are all the questions I had, but I'll reserve my comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I had a couple of other that came to mind, if you wouldn't mind. I was thinking about when I've rented Airbnbs, VRBOs in the past, I don't think I've ever been required to give my home address, my car license plate number. That information has never been asked of me
So I have
on
had
those platforms.
home address or some type of address is required to rent. You have to give it to Airbnb. And so I want to clarify that language in there is, a lot of it is directed to the platform. But you can, as a host, require above and beyond the minimum standards for that platform. And I have been asked at certain places to give a tag number because it was assigned parking spaces, and that city was, and that HOA or whatever was just adamant about you had to park in that space and nobody else's space, and they were issuing tickets, and so I did have to give my tag number for that. And this is honestly, this is at the request of our local police, so that if they're, and again, they don't have to, the ordinance is so that if we ask for it, they provide it. It's not that they have to somehow constantly be feeding us this information.
I guess is it a public database that someone else can look at, and that's problematic?
Well, I'm not being argumentative. All permit data is publicly accessible. Every permit we issue right now, you could do an open records request, and in 3 days you'd get a list of all addresses and permit types. So.
No, but what I mean is, as the person renting, my information is going in that registry.
No, sir.
That's what it says.
Oh, okay. But that is not something that we post online.
Well, that's my concern, that
Right.
it might be.
No, we wouldn't. No, sir. No, we would not post. We wouldn't post that tag number. We wouldn't post their home address. We wouldn't even post their name or anything like that. This is if there's a police incident, then we can go to that owner and say, please provide us that tag number.
Understood, okay, I got it, okay. There was one other thing, and it slipped my mind right now. Oh, I know. know what it was. It was on the fees. It's just a wordsmithing thing in the fee section on the last page. It lists the fee amounts, but at the end it says not to exceed. I think we just have to define what the fee is.
Oh, yeah. That's standard language. We can just say, well, okay. So at the end of the day,
Or what the fine is.
the
Excuse me.
the judge has that discretion on what the fine is, and our judge said typically, if there is something in our ordinance, we'll follow that amount, but he or she does not have to, because
Okay.
they're a separate branch.
I understand. Okay. That's it.
I don't have any specific questions, as most of them have been already asked by my fellow commissioners. I'm going to go back. Commissioner Leota, do you have any other comments?
No, that's it for tonight.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson?
So I have a couple comments, and so my first one, so Robin, I know you were speaking of like Lake Lanier and Savannah, and so in my mind I'm thinking, but those are what I consider touristy. I mean, you go there for a specific reason. I've been to both for a weekend, or and so I don't, in my mind, I can't compare that to Peachtree City, because this is a community and that's what it's meant to be. Not that we don't want visitors
Right.
to come. So
think that
I'm really torn, honestly,
Well,
because
that legitimizes the low percentage number,
yeah,
because 25% of our single-family homes in the city are already rented out. And so I think
Yeah.
if you were to do a similar line like that, well, that's not appropriate for Peachtree City. That's appropriate for Hall County and Savannah.
Right.
And that's why the 1%. I
Right.
mean, that's I think argument,
Yeah.
a legal argument based
And,
for it.
and so I'm just gonna, something like crossed my mind. I was thinking about it and I was listening to the residents, and like, it seems the ones who either have had short-term rentals or are in favor of them and or have been here a long time, like are, long-term residents. So I don't really want to suggest another requirement, but at the same time, I'm thinking we don't really want people purchasing a home in Peachtree City just for the reason to rent it out. Like, so
Well,
I wish we could somehow add a requirement for you need to be in your home 3 years or two, I don't know, some length of time
Yes.
before you start renting that out as a short-term rental. You know what I mean? Like,
No, I do.
that would make more sense.
Well, unfortunately.
But I don't know.
We did ask this of,
Oh, you
of
did?
our city.
Okay.
Oh, goodness, yes, yes.
Okay.
Even before the draft from last year was, can we restrict it? Can we, not do it to LLCs or just to owner-occupied housing or the primary home? And the issue is the constitutionality of it.
Right.
And we can't regulate who owns property. That's.
Yeah, okay. Well, just a thought that I had. It just seemed like the people who seem to be renting them are ones who maybe their situation has changed. They've raised their kids and they don't want to lose their home here, so they decide to offer it as a short-term rental. Makes perfect sense. But just someone to come here and do it as an investment, they're not really being part of our community. They're bringing in other people who are not being part of our community either. So I'm just really torn on the whole thing, honestly. So, but we do. Okay, so my final statement is, if we are going to allow them, I mean, we definitely have to have some regulation. So I'm all for having some of these things in place. We have to. It's the only way to make it work and protect our community. So.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hamner, comments?
So, we've talked about this topic a ton. We've heard a lot of thoughts, pro, con, on this. I think one of the things that we can all agree on is that it's going to be incredibly difficult to come up with an agreement that's going to satisfy everybody on council and the general public, et cetera. What happened to Smoke Rise obviously was terrible on that, and but at the same time, we also have a number of people who've been running these for years and care about their properties and want to continue to of course, continue to run their properties that they own in the way that they want to, but also still, be very cognizant of the greater community that is Peachtree City as well on this. When we talk about the facts, again, the last time this came in front of the Planning Commission, I asked very similar questions about, like what's been the complaints on these areas, again, that are being managed by, all these individuals that care about their properties. And again, the answer at that time was 0. I know that you need to get additional information around that, but, I'm assuming, but we'll see, obviously. Still would love to know the facts around this, but I'm assuming that, again, we haven't heard anything really consequential about short-term rentals on this, and it's probably still going to be at 0, is my assumption on this. So, it comes down to, for the properties that are being properly managed right now, they don't seem to really be causing a greater harm to the greater community right now. I actually had a neighbor come up to me the other day. He saw that this was on the agenda, and he said something that really stuck with me. I think when he said it, he didn't quite realize that it would really resonate with me the way that it did, but it did. But he came up to me and he said, "I'm against short-term rentals within Peachtree City, but I don't know why." And it was based really around like a feeling of like, hey, if I live next to one, I would not be comfortable about that. But at the same time, he couldn't explain why he wouldn't be comfortable with that. We talked again about like, well, the last time we talked about this as a planning commission, there was no, complaints about the ones that are really being properly managed, where the owners really care about the properties and things like that. And he's like, yeah, that totally makes sense. I don't hear about, again, any of these issues that are happening on a grand scale outside of the smoke rise issue, of course. But the last time we did talk about this, I said something which was that, I felt like at the time this was a solution looking for a problem, and that, we wanted to be very careful in terms of the way that the city was interacting with people who, again, obviously have property rights and, again, have so far proven to be, really good and caring about the community at large. So I'm still of the opinion that, we need to still do something like a registration on this. We need to know, obviously, what properties are in there, so that way at least we formally know what's happening on these areas. And obviously we've gotten some more information about this, some at least directional on this, that we understand, like maybe the numbers that are in here. But, I think that we'd still need to monitor these and at least understand that what the properties are within this community on that, and not go overboard in terms of any sort of regulations. I'm really opposed to, for example, sorry, Mr. Leota, I'm really opposed to, sending out notices to neighbors of around 200 feet. I'm not totally comfortable with something like an online registry as well, where, again, there are valid concerns about what that could mean for the owners of these properties on this. So again, there's not going to be any sort of agreement where it's going to satisfy everybody on this. But I don't think that we should go overboard in terms of passing something or coming up with something that is just going to be more heavy-handed than what's really needed at this time. Those are my comments.
Commissioner Cruz.
Thanks. I want to echo what Commissioner Leota said and say thanks to our neighbors that came out. 'Cause I said it before, I'll say it again. I think it's really helpful to have comments and to hear both sides of an issue like this. I think short-term rental restrictions and permitting ordinances protect the character of our community, quite frankly, and also the safety, not only of Peachtree City residents, but the safety of folks that come to visit us. I think last time we took this up, we did good work. We looked at this, we compromised. I think the proposals that we submitted and put forth to City Council were good ones. And there was a survey that came out very quickly after we went through and put forth what we put forth to City Council, and almost every single provision that was a major provision that was mentioned in that survey that we had supported was also supported by the community at large. So I think it's important to mention that. I also think it's important to mention that the kind of folks that come today and are against this aren't the kind of folks that we are trying to regulate against, right? We're trying to regulate against irresponsible property owners that aren't causing issues in the communities where some of these short-term rentals, quite frankly, can become nuisances. Maybe not greater harms, like Ken said, but nuisances. And I think what's important to really distinguish here is that sometimes something can be a nuisance and you want to be a good neighbor and not bring it up when it's a nuisance. And so you don't call the police. You don't call the police when something is just bothering you because something is happening down your block or down the street or whatever, and you want to be a good neighbor. But when something rises to a greater harm, then it's a real problem. And I think that's why we need responsible regulation in this city on short-term rentals. And I think what we've done in the past is good. And I think what we are about to do today and bring forward what we did last year is also good. I'm against the database. I don't think we need a database. Last year we did the 200 feet, and I'm still in support of that. I agree with Commissioner Leota. I don't think that fingerprinting should be necessary. I've gone through many background checks myself over the years. I've never had to give fingerprints. I understand where this might be coming from, but I know it's possible to do a background check without fingerprints. So maybe we should look into that. But the rest of it, the way that we put it forward last year is how I still feel. So that's what I would recommend that we do tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I just want to echo what the other commissioners have said. I actually had a meeting earlier today, and one of the topics that came up was public interaction. And you know, we look at Peachtree City, and we're not a small city. I mean, we're a good-sized city when you really think about it. But we are very close, and I think that's very important to realize and recognize. You know, we look out for our neighbors as family when it really comes down to it, and that's good. And again, just thank everyone coming out, whether you're for this or against it. As the other commissioners said, we spent a lot of time as just the commission last year going through this and trying to put something together that put some regulations in place. We kind of looked at it as what's enough, what's not enough, and what's too much. And in some regards, some of those are very difficult to put just a line in the sand and say this is exactly where it crosses over. Because there's so many nuances to this ordinance. There really is. You know, when we talked about a background check in our original, none of us, as far as I know, and I was kind of surprised to see it, none of us talked anything about FBI registries. There was nothing of that sort. But, you know, we look to what in my industry, we call them SMEs, subject matter experts. And I look at Chief Moon and her department. I look at our fire marshal, and our fire department as subject matter experts. I look at our planning department. I look at our code enforcement as subject matter experts. And I refer to them when we come into these situations where we don't know the details and all the idiosyncrasies of those regulations. And it wouldn't be right for us to try to do that. It's not our forte and not our expertise. So, you know, we go back and yes, we need something. And when we put this out there, that something became the FBI fingerprinting, if we wanted to go to that extent. Same thing, someone brought up a comment, not here but somewhere else, about fire extinguishers and the cost of having those fire extinguishers checked. And I know because my wife has a business and we have to every year have our fire extinguishers checked, and it's not cheap. But I would refer to our fire marshal to say, is there another avenue that meets the requirements of the state and the federal fire code, or the state fire code, to do something like that? And if there is, then I would ask them to go ahead and put that forward as an option to try to make it economical, but still make sure that it's safe. And that is the most important part. You know, it's not just our families, and I have smoke alarms in the halls, I have smoke alarms in the bedrooms, I have fire extinguishers in the kitchen, the laundry room, our bedroom, because when I was growing up, we had a fire at my parents' house. And we were lucky that we didn't, number one, no one was really injured, and number two, that we didn't lose the house. But I made sure after that we have smoke alarms, carbon monoxide, fire extinguishers, because it just takes one accident. And we've heard about that. It just takes one, and you hope and pray that you don't have a loss of life. So you have people staying in your homes, not just you, but other people, and you don't know what they're going to do. So it's been difficult to try to put this together. Part of my thinking is, well, there were some comments, in the past, well, Airbnb or Vrbo, they manage the people that have these. Well, I look at it as, well, they're not looking out for what's best for Peachtree City. They're not looking out what's best for your family, your neighbors. They're looking out what's best for their bottom line. And I'm sure some people say, well, I hate to say it this way, but some people probably say, well, the government isn't looking out for my best interest in certain things. Putting these regulations, putting these ordinances, because it affects my family. And why would they go ahead and do this and require me to do this? Well, again, you're on both sides. And we try, to find that happy medium, knowing, again, we're not going to be able to please everyone. I think what we put forward last year was very good, and I agree with Commissioner Kriz and the other commissioners. Is it perfect? No. And that's why, we looked when it went to council as recommended, that there would be a lot more discussion done with that, and bringing those subject matter experts in and providing their input as to certain details that we didn't either know or think of at that time, and unfortunately it didn't happen to the extent that maybe we thought it would, and therefore we're back this evening to discuss this again. We do need something. It's just, again, what is good and what is too much. One of the things that was brought up is Peachtree City's not a destination. Well, I think we are. Our city really promotes our city very well. And you think about what's going on in Fayette County, just around us. You think about the U.S. soccer facilities that are going into Fayetteville. I don't think people quite realize what that means. I mean, we were up against cities such as Chicago, Denver, other major cities. It's like Atlanta going up against those, and it was Fayette County that ended up getting the U.S. soccer facilities. You're going to see just incredible things come out of that facility, I'm sure. You have Trilith still growing and growing. And I'm sure there's going to be more people coming just for some of the things that's going to be happening there, and that's just, right around the corner. So I look at not only Peachtree City but Fayette County as a destination that people want to come to. So, as Commissioner Kriz says, it's not against the people who run their business well. It's the people out there that don't. And unfortunately, we have to have those things in place to take care of those people who don't, or they won't do it. So I'm looking at, yes, staff.
So we have confirmed with Chief Moon
Yes.
that the fingerprint thing is so, and I felt like I already said this, but maybe I didn't say it clearly enough. The requirement for fingerprinting is so that we can do a nationwide background check. Did I say
Yep,
that?
you
Oh, I did.
mentioned it,
Okay.
yeah.
So that's where that came from, and I feel like that's come up a lot tonight, and it is one of the changes that was made since you last heard this.
And I guess that harkens back to, what is enough and what is too much? Is it enough for us just to take a look at just people in Georgia through the GBI? Is it something more that we want to do, because there are people who own homes in the area that do not live here? This is not their primary residence, probably. So do we want to go and do further checks? that's something that we need to kind of hash out and think about as to what we want to do and send, as we make a recommendation to council. Do we want to keep that requirement, or do we want to limit it? I guess, you know, looking at the entire picture, I like what we did. I think, I wish there was maybe more that we could do longer term to have more discussions, but, you know, that's something that I don't know if we would get any more than what we currently have after what we've done. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at my fellow council, or fellow commissioners, and do we wanna make some changes to the background check? That seems to be a contentious point with some, and understandably so. Do we wanna limit that? Do we want to, when we make our referral to council, have, you know, Chief Moon maybe make some recommendations based upon things that she sees in her dealings with things such as this?
Sure. I think that's prudent. I mean, at the very least, we can say that we're not, as a group, we're not really comfortable with the fingerprinting thing. And we can ask her to maybe explain to council what the differences between a fingerprint background check are and a non-fingerprint background check, and sort of how comprehensive that is. You know, if I can get hired for a legal job without fingerprint background check, I think it should be reasonable that, you know, you can own a short-term rental without fingerprint background check. That's my stance on it.
I agree.
Agree. Okay. I think that's something we would definitely like to put in there back to council.
Okay.
Yeah.
To investigate that further.
It also seems pretty agreed upon here that we don't like the database.
Is
Right.
I do want to confirm, speaking now, forever hold your peace, because I wasn't sure if everybody disagreed with the database.
Well, one of the things, and we may have talked about this before or not, I can't remember now. The way I had originally looked at the database, it would not be available for anyone to go in and do a search. It was more information available to public safety. And my question was related to that. And I'm just gonna make a reference back to, I hate to do it, but make it back to a hotel. If there would be an incident at one of the hotels in the area, how would our public safety be able to get the information from that company related to whatever that situation would be?
Okay, so if there were a police incident at a hotel, it would be through the general management. If it were an incident at a property, it would be through the property owner, which, quite frankly, our current database of property ownership is through tax records and does not include phone numbers. And so they'd have to do a database through whatever they have available to find some type of contact information for that property owner. For building permits, we always require contact information for the property owner and the applicant or
Right.
contractor. And keep in mind that we are moving towards a online mapping of all permit information. Not applicant contact information, but basically, hey, there's work happening at this address, and you could go and search for what if a permit has been pulled. That's sort of the direction a lot of cities, and it's all about transparency and having that information readily available. It's, but I will agree, it's the locked doors syndrome, right? A determined criminal isn't going to be deterred by a locked door, but you know, somebody who's looking for a quick fix may be deterred by a locked door. And so I can see that, you know, having that information available at least tells the people that, hey, this is rented a lot by folks who weren't around, which means it may be vacant a lot. Quite frankly, we know that they scour the tax records for certain ethnic sounding names, and during certain times of the year, they hit them up. So it's all about, I mean, that information is available, it's out there already, it's more about how accessible we want it.
So let me ask it as this, if we would do away with the database, through the business occupancy, I guess it would be the business permit,
Through this permit process.
through this,
Uh-huh.
that information of the business would still be there.
Absolutely, yeah, it's through
And
there, through open
the-
records, we have to.
Right, and that would be available to whoever,
Anybody who asked.
anyone who asked,
Mhm.
and our public safety would be able to get a hold of that, and I'm just thinking,
Mhm.
worst case scenario, something would happen. And there's no information, no records available at the residence, and I'm just, like I said, worst case scenario. There needs to be something that's available, and if that information is through the building, or through the business license, then that's
Yeah.
way to
and
do it.
Through this permit.
I'm sorry, yeah,
Yes, yep.
through the permit, correct, okay. Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, in my opinion, I'm in favor of the 200-foot notice instead of the database. I know Commissioner Hamner's not, but I think the rest of us, it seemed like we were in favor of that. Is that a correct statement?
If I remember correctly, I think that's what we
what we
went
did
forward
last
with,
year,
and
yeah.
I understood, yeah, you were not in favor of that, but that's what we went forward with when we made the recommendation to
Yeah.
the council.
So those
Yeah.
two changes are the only two changes that I would say we would promote to city council.
Yeah.
As long as everyone is in agreement. Except you, of course.
As long as a majority.
Mhm.
And what I did at the last time is I highlighted the changes that you did, and I noted that they weren't unanimous and who was for and who was against, so that they understood that that both are, and that they would then discuss and decide amongst themselves.
Okay.
I will do that.
One other minor thing before this, section 917.7, item 4. Need to correct the typo there.
917.
Yep, it's the Georgia Crime Information Center,
Oh,
and it's the Georgia Grime
can you
Information
give me
Center.
that number? Oh, yes, it is.
Sorry
I
about
see.
that.
No, thank you.
So do we move to recommend approval? Is that what we do? Recommend consideration?
Well, we're gonna recommend,
What are we moving to do?
You're moving to recommend approval of the ordinance with consideration for replacing the online database with a 200-foot notification and removing the fingerprint portion of the background check.
So moved.
okay. So we do have a motion for approval with the two changes, two recommendations that were made. Do we have a second on that?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion for approval with recommended changes and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Recommendation for approval passed.
Understood? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Now it's time for the next slide. Do you want to take this?
I'm going to refer over to Kenneth at this point. And just before Kenneth gets in, just to give a little bit more background on this, we, as a planning commission, deals with a lot of ordinances, and in those ordinances, there are, again, as I said, idiosyncrasies, there are discrepancies, there's vagueness, there's conflict between some. And what we started talking about was trying to get together to pretty much unify. And there was a project last year to create a unified development ordinance. Unfortunately, it didn't go as far as maybe some people had hoped. But we started talking about what could we do as a community to pull all this together, to simplify it, to make it better, to look to even some other jurisdictions as to things we may not even have thought of. One of the things that was brought up again tonight is golf cart parking. And it's really hard to believe. And we were actually, I think, some of us shocked as we came on the planning commission that we don't have any ordinances on golf cart parking for a golf cart city, which is hard to believe, but it's true. So that was going to be part of what was called the UDO, is to put things like that in place to ensure that we not only have that, but things that we brought forward of car chargers, of bicycle parking, of character of the city, of different things, because we have a lot of patchwork between our ordinances, our overlay districts, our thoroughfares, as Kenneth will touch on. So we're continuing our work on this. We originally had a presentation in front of council on the 17th of September. 19th, sorry, I keep getting the date wrong. I don't know why.
We both mess it up.
Yeah, so we decided we were gonna go ahead and move it further along, because there's still a lot of work that we would like to do as a group, to put the best presentation we can forward to council. So now it's been moved to November 21st. I think I have that date correct.
Sounds right.
So it gives us some additional time, and part of that is that, quite frankly, coming up not only in front of the planning commission, but also council, we're gonna have a very full fall, to say the least. There's a lot of things coming forward, that's gonna be some good discussion again. So we wanna go ahead and make sure that we have time to focus in on those items, of course, but also be able to put time in onto this endeavor. So that being said, I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I was gonna turn it over to Kenneth, but yes.
And doing it in November allows us to, if we have a change in membership on the count, on your body, that they would be able to get up to speed and
That is true,
participate fully.
yes. A good point.
That's a great point.
Okay. Kenneth?
Awesome. First of all, great summary. Thank you for all that. I'll just touch on this very briefly since you already did a fantastic
Sorry.
job. No, it's totally fine. But just know that we have, in the last meeting that we did talk about this quite a bit, where we were proposing the Unified Development Ordinance and additional overlay districts for village centers in Peachtree City, where we, in the UDO, would consolidate a number of existing ordinances, streamline our regulations, address inconsistencies, and also allow us to prepare for doing overlay districts that will give each village center its own unique character, which could be really great. We do plan to present these proposals to City Council for both approval of our plan, getting funding, and also emphasizing the benefits that the UDO and redevelopment would give us for future planning. And by future planning, that's not meaning like, in 5 years, like, this is going to sound fantastical, but it's true. But this is like foundational stuff for 100 years from now. Like, as things get redeveloped and across all of our village centers, it's going to lay those foundations for all those things that are going to be redeveloped years and years from now.
Yeah, and one of the things actually I kind of called it earlier today is not as much as redevelopment, but I really look at it as revitalization.
Yeah.
Is what I've kind of thought this to be. Is looking forward as to what Peachtree City looks like revitalized as we go into the future.
Yep. So that's a good segue for this last bullet real quick, that this is going to be really hard. It's going to be really complex for us to do. We would love to collaborate as planning commissioners, with experts, staff as appropriate, getting citizen input. This says it could take 2 years to complete. It probably is going to be even longer than that. We shall see. But again, it just speaks to the amount of complexity that's going to be happening with this project long term. A couple of very brief updates since we last spoke. And even this point's not right anymore. So
As of earlier today.
as of this late afternoon, it's not the second meeting in October, it's the second meeting in November. And also, thank you to staff. We last time spoke about like, hey, give us some great examples of areas for improvement. There it is, printed out, multiple pages. Thank you to you guys. I know, again, there's a lot going on, so thank you for all the examples of those. I glanced over it. It's more than what it's more than what I've anticipated.
Nothing if not thorough.
Yeah, it was very good. We'll definitely reach out if we need more, but I don't know what we would ask right now, given that there's already so much for us to take a look at. Also, just want to align in terms of like the actual goals that we want from all of this is that, you know, we would love council's approval for the Planning Commission to create a UDO committee that would include Planning Commission members on the committee. We would also get approval to engage city staff and access professionals and experts for guidance on this. Again, this is going to be complex. We don't know what we don't know, and it's probably going to be substantial in terms of what we don't know on this. So there's going to be a major opportunities for learning on all this as we kind of figure our way out through this process. And also, very important, getting some sort of approval to allocate either existing funds or funds in the budget for the UDO process is going to be really important for us as well, because even though we are volunteers, some of these experts are going to cost money. Are not volunteers. So we did have some questions from the last meeting, and I'll say this, I don't know how much we want to go into depth right now on this, but these were things that were brought up. And also, Mr. Leota, you also sent an email with some questions as well. I tried to bring those in here as well. But these are things just for us to consider on this. Is like, what specific concerns or opinions will council members express regarding proposals, and what can we do to proactively address them? You know, we've already heard, obviously, some very nice things from council members. Thank you for again, all the feedback that we received so far. We've also received some you know, through the grapevine, and also that came up through the offsite. We also heard maybe some concerns about this as well. You know, we definitely want to help address any sort of questions that happen, that are happening now in that presentation, so that way we can just get ahead of them, provide all the information that council is going to want for this. So that's something that, again, and I say this comment applying to all the questions on this, but over the next 3-ish months on this, you know, this is an opportunity for all of us to collectively work on this. We'll figure out how we do that. You know, I don't have an answer to that right this second, but, you know, we should ask, you know, a question like this as we're taking a look at this and helping address, you know, coming up with a presentation that's going to be well received by council as best as possible. Also, you know, a question that was brought up is like, you know, okay, so we know that we would love to have planning commissioners involved in the UDO process, but is there anybody else that we want to like formally get involved? I think it's a question that we should ask ourselves and answer on that. I could keep going through these questions, and
So
I know it's already late.
Do you want like active discussion on some of these? Or
It's up to us. I mean, are there any initial thoughts, at least on the first 2 questions on this?
So, do you want to have those questions answered by November 21st?
Yes,
Okay,
or at least, you know, an opinion from us could be good.
because some of them, I think you could make recommendations in the process at the 21st, but not necessarily have the answer. For example, what is the composition of the committee? Well, all committees are technically appointed by the mayor. And so your recommendation would be,
Right.
this is who we think it can comprise of. Okay, and you would like to have, so what we could do is break these questions up
Mm-hmm.
and discuss them sort of, not individually, but just at least allow us focused time on the topic as workshop items through the next couple of meetings. We don't have a big schedule planned for the 9th. We have one item,
Okay.
maybe two.
Okay.
So typically when we have one item, we say, what do you think about canceling it? And we'll move it to but maybe we don't do that. Maybe we have the one item and then we spend an hour talking about this. And then that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4 planning commission meetings. Oh wait, isn't Labor Day? Isn't one of
Yeah, the
ours on
9th
Labor?
is-
Shoot,
no,
city is
no.
actually, this year, we're actually closed on the 9th. But that doesn't mean that you couldn't have a special called meeting. We could do that.
Labor Day is the second.
Yeah, Labor Day's the second.
Labor Day's the second.
Labor
Yeah.
Day's the
Oh,
second.
next
So I
month.
think we're okay.
Oh, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It was Veterans Day. Is that the one that we had an issue with? It's November 11th
Okay.
that we're closed for, but we would typically have, so I guess what I'm saying is we have three. We have three
Okay.
meetings that we could break these up into.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. And I shared these questions out earlier today, and I know that was only earlier today, so we're all busy. So you may not have
Chance to look.
had a chance to look, which is totally fine. But these are at least some of the initial questions that I've pulled out from what's already been discussed in the last meeting and then also over email since the last meeting on that. Robin, I think that's a great idea for us to use the next few meetings to really kind of
I
take a
agree.
deeper dive into these.
Okay.
Yep. Cool. All right. So this is kind of just tying into what I just said. It's like, let's think about, this is obviously not an exhaustive list of things that we could ask ourselves. We don't need to bring up any additional questions or topics right this minute, but, do be thinking about like what else we would want to discuss moving forward to add to our lovely list that's already right here, so that we can just continue to answer questions. So next steps, finalize the presentation date, done, at least for, right now it's the second in November, the second meeting in November, and then continue to ask and answer questions between now and then as well. I think we had in the last meeting a very good foundation for the presentation. Obviously, there's still a lot that needs to be put into it, and of course, we can use the questions and answers that we have and the things that staff has already provided to really help.
The additional information that, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that we've got at least a good foundation for everything. And as we continue to go through this process, here again is the presentation in all of its glory that we talked about last time. We'll just continue to build onto it as we continue to move forward. So those are the things that I'm proposing as next steps for us.
Sounds good.
That's it for tonight.
Appreciate it, Kenneth.
Yep,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
I just have one comment. I think this is great. I do worry, like you guys worry about the ability for us to get a consultant for the price that, we're going to have available to us, which is $0 if
I am not the keeper of the budget.
Yeah.
However, it's not an insignificant amount of money. It was from what's called the CIP, which means it's not from the general fund. So when it didn't get used, it stayed in the CIP and it went into what's called contingency. And there are projects we have to use that money for contingency, especially now with inflation. So there may be more than 0, is what I'm saying. And we don't have to go through the general fund, which is what I thought we would have to do, but that's been explained to me.
Okay. That's good.
So, to further that, if it's something that is allowable, we may want to ask for qualified individuals who live here locally to potentially apply to help the city. Maybe they have some sort of experience in this area where they would be willing to donate their time, just like we do as volunteers, right? It's very possible that we might be able to find someone that way if we don't have funds, like Robin had kind of mentioned.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we're really hoping that we have some individuals in the city, as like we talked about, that are the subject matter experts, that will be willing to put some of their time into this because it impacts them directly as residents of the city. So that's really what we're hoping, and we'll see what comes out of that when we get to that point.
Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
So next meeting is September 8th, or 9th, I'm
Okay.
sorry. What is it?
9th.
9th, okay.
Yep.
September 9th, perfect, okay. Just wanted to confirm that. Any other comments? No? Okay, so we do have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.